Hey everyone, welcome to MT Guitar. Today I want to show you why inversions change everything. By everything I mean they change your understanding, your total understanding of music. So I'm going to go through 4 reasons. I'm going to show you some examples of how inversions not only function and work, but maybe more importantly, how they almost revolutionize your understanding of the fretboard, of the guitar, and music in general, music theory perhaps as well. Let's start with the first reason. Inversions give you a 300% increase in your chord options, in your bass lines and in your triads. So 300%, that's a lot. Well, where are we starting from? We're starting from knowing all of our major chords, all of our minor chords, whether open or barred, and all of our 7th chords. All right, so G7, C7, a lot of people know those, and we can now create inversions of all these chords. So why don't we start with some examples? I'm going to teach about more of the sort of the nuts and bolts, how to use it and what it means. All right. So let's say I have a chord progression, and I'm going to go through like about 10 inversions right now. And these are chords that you might have even recognized, but I'm going to just lay them out. And then after I do that, we'll start to see what these chords are and how we can think of them and how to use them sort of in any key, any situation. All right, so start with a G chord. Say I want to go to C. Go to G over B. Here's a C. Now, that's nice. I want to go to a D chord, but I'm going to do an A over C sharp. Finally, here's a D. Now I want to go back to G, but first, go to D over F sharp G. So a little quicker sounds like this. Okay, all right, now let's do one with even more inversions. These are going to be some inversions with 7th chords as well. So we're going to start with the G. A lot of people know this one, D over F sharp, go into E minor. But now I want to do an E minor 7 over D. All open there. C, C major 7 over B, A minor, here's an A minor 7 over G, D over F sharp, actually D7 over F sharp, F major 7, C over E, back to D7 over F sharp to G. A little quicker would be So these are open inversions, all right? And let's start there. Then I'm going to talk about what to do from there with triads and even spread triads as well. But triads are very powerful with inversions. All right, so let's define what inversions are by first talking about root position. So for instance, G, root position is simply the lowest note is a G, all right? And this can be true for bar chords too. If I'm way up here, this is a root position because this is a G note. All right, first inversion would be 3-5-1. So let's back up. Root position is 1-3-5. Doesn't have to be in that order, but let's look at an open G chord. G, B, D is 1-3-5. Now, if I want to do a first inversion, I would have to start on the 3. So I'm inverting it by starting on the 3. The 3 is the bass note. So now G over B becomes this, right? And we can actually just isolate it 5th, 4th, 3rd strings to see that it's a 3-5-1, G over B. Second inversion is, you guessed it, starting on the 5. So now it's 5-1-3. So a G over D, actually this, the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings of a G chord. That's a 5-1-3 or DGB. So root position, first inversion, second inversion. Now there's another inversion, it's called third inversion. If I have a G7, I've now added a 7 to the chord, so there's 4 notes, 1-3-5, flat 7 in this case. For a G7, I can start on the flat 7 to have a third inversion. And I don't really need the 5, so I could just do flat 7, 1, 3, and just skip the 5. Or I could double the flat 7, double the root, whatever. But that's literally a third inversion. Now I can also see it here with the G bass, That's a G7 over F. That's a third inversion. Flat 7, 1, 3. Okay? In this case, there's a 5 in the chord. But the bass is everything. So the bass is where we get that third inversion. So that's the first reason to learn inversions, or how inversions change everything. They give you a 300% increase because now we've got first inversion, second inversion, third inversion, all right, on top of root position. Now, we're going to explore that in a bit, but let's keep going with the reasons. The second reason that inversions change everything is they give you a fresh new sound. Imagine, I like to think of a metaphor like looking at an object perhaps, or taking a photo of something. If you're looking at it dead on, almost like a 2D flat image of it, you're maybe having a root position chord, right? This is just G. This is C, this is D. And that's great. But if I want to see G from a different angle, I can now make it almost like a three-dimensional image and look at it from a different vantage point, a different view. So instead of just G, I have G over B. Here's a fretted version of this inversion. D over G, and etc. Right? I could have a G over B or G over D, and these are inversions. These are not just G, right? So we'll get to triads in a sec. The same thing is true if you think about it with a different light. If I am viewing an object in the heat of the day, maybe I want to take a photo of it in the golden hour when there's sunset or sunrise, and to get a different color, get a different contrast, a different hue. So inversions will give you a fresh new sound. I'm sort of inverting G and C and D here a little bit, right? There's a second inversion, first inversion of D. Now, how about something a little strange? A third inversion of a G major 7. Pretty tense. To a first inversion. Root position, first inversion of a D, etc. I'm not asking you to remember all this, but I'm just sort of showing you that a simple G, C, D progression has endless choices, right? You can just sort of meander around with inversions and get to a lot of different places very quickly. All right, the third way that inversions will change everything for you is they will teach you the fretboard. Now that's a bold claim, but the deal is, root position is somewhat fixed, right? G chord, E minor chord, C chord. And we kind of have to move around to memorize shapes, and we might feel a little bit boxed in. So inversions will sort of help you break free, and by doing so, they'll teach you the fretboard because you'll be able to move around more musically, more melodically, more smoothly. All right, so open chords and song progressions are just scratching the surface. When I was playing some of these chords that you might recognize, that's just the beginning. If we move up the fretboard, we start to have to use triads because there's bar chords and stuff, but we can now take those bar chords and kind of pull them apart. Instead of doing this whole thing, we could do a triad. Yeah. And start to maneuver around beyond just chords. Now what's happening is I'm just playing a lot of inversions right there. It's almost like making the guitar like a piano. If I play the piano, play a nice root position triad, move a couple notes around, I get an inversion pretty easily. Not so easy on the guitar, so we have work to do. Speaking of work and studying, I'm going to be putting a study guide of this lesson on the Patreon at patreon.com/mtguitar, where I'll be laying this out for you kind of in an exercise format with some helpful tips along the way. Speaking of the Patreon, there's a ton of resources, tabs, study guides, even some backing tracks and group lessons if you're interested. And I really appreciate all the patrons out there. It makes this channel possible. Thank you. Okay, so let's put this third claim of, inversions teaching you the fretboard, sort of put it to test here, and see if I can run a 1-6-4-5 G, E minor, C, D up and down the neck using inversions and learning the fretboard. If I have a nice first inversion triad here, this is 3-5-1 of a G, B, D, G. Okay? Now I'm going to go to a 4 chord. I'm going to go 3-4 and make a root position 4 chord. Now I want to go up the neck and make a first inversion C chord. Well, does that look familiar? That's the same shape up here. But that first inversion brought me up to root position. Now, first inversion. Now I'm going to go down to a G. I don't want to go all the way back down here. I already was there, so I'm going to go to a second inversion G. All right. Now I want to give some tension. I want to give some bluesiness to it, so I'm going to make it a third inversion, G7 over F. Okay, that's a flat 7, 1, 3 right there. Now I'm going to resolve it back to a 4 chord, first inversion, but now I want to go up to a second inversion. Does that look familiar? That's this same D kind of triad shape up there for a C. So it's really bringing me up, not shackled to just root position stuff. Now resolve to a root position 1 chord or a G chord. Does that look familiar? Well, that's what we played here, but now just at a G, okay, instead of a C. Now I will play a first inversion D. We know this triad from earlier. It's the one we started with. That's 3, 5, 1 of a D chord. Make it a D7 just for fun. Now I'm going to go to an E minor, first inversion. But I'm a little high. I want to kind of go down now. So that's a nice first inversion, flat 3, 5, 1 of a minor triad. Back to root position. Then I'm going to go to a 4 chord. Notice it's very similar notes. I'm using smooth voice leading. Back to a 6 chord. Let's resolve this with a 5 chord, root position. But I'm going to make it a third inversion at the end here, just to give it a little bit of movement. That's a flat 7. Just take that D chord and make it a flat 7 instead of the root, giving it a third inversion. D over C, if you want to be exact, back to a G over B. So I took a trip up the fretboard. I made musical choices. It wasn't like, play a G chord, play a C chord. It was like, well, let me play this C chord, first inversion. Let me play this second inversion. It looks like a D triad, but up. So I'm learning about the fretboard through inversions. It's also tickling my ear. My ear likes it. So it's helping me learn. You don't really want to learn all the time in a bubble of do this, do this, do this, because sometimes the ear will reject that and think it's too stiff. So by playing inversions, it opens up your ear, right? Not just your mind, but your ear. That's why inversions can change everything, because it can actually get your ear more excited and more involved. Okay, the last reason that inversions change everything and change your understanding is that it teaches you bass lines and movement. So this is something that probably gets overlooked, because you might be thinking, well, I don't really care about bass lines that much. I'm playing the guitar, you know, the bass is not my job. That's actually a little bit inaccurate of a thought, if that's the thought you're having. No worries, but every time you play a chord or a triad, there is a bass note to it. Doesn't need to be super, super low to be a bass note. Simply a triad has a bass note. Bass note, we can just translate it to the lowest note you're playing. All right, now in music we just call this a bass note. Even mandolin has a bass note every time it plays these high voicings, or a ukulele. So we want to understand bass is not just cool low notes from the bass, but also what we're playing has a bass to it. And if we take that seriously, we understand that chords will have a low note, or the bass, and a high note, or the melody. And so the melody and bass are interacting, and the notes in between create the rest of the chord. A really good way to think about music. Now, since inversions are all about what note is on the bass, it stands to reason that inversions teach us a lot about bass notes. They teach us a lot about bass lines and melodies in the bass. All right, so many songs will do, you know, sort of like cliches and stuff. You know, here's kind of a line cliche. Going down from a D major 7, right? James Taylor does stuff like this as well. Many artists do. If I have a D, here's a D major 7 over C sharp. It's a third inversion. Some would just call this a D over C sharp for short. The major 7 is kind of implied in the bass note, but it's literally a D major 7 over C sharp. It's a third inversion. B minor 7, or even D over B, but let's just call it B minor 7. A over D. So my bass is moving while the chord is pretty much staying the same. G, root position, over F sharp. That's a third inversion G chord because the 7th is on the bass. E minor 7, A7 would be a way to get back. So I'm learning about good bass lines. What if I want to get back? Here's a C to an A over C sharp to a D, right? What if I want to go to a B7 and E minor? I could do D, B7, E minor to change the song a little bit. But let's say I wanted to have a little smoother bass line. Well, I could have D, B7 over D sharp, first inversion to an E minor. Get up to a G through a D sharp. G. A good finger-picking song that does this is Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. You know, they could have just gone C, G, A minor 7, back to G. It would really not be the same song, you know, it would change it. So we're going to do C to G over B to A minor 7. Back to G over B. So that B note is the bass. It's C, B, A. Very smooth bass line. When they go to the chorus, instead of going up to a D or a D7, it's going to D7 over F sharp to G. Now to get to E minor, F sharp is a passing note almost, right, to E minor. Okay? So you can find inversions all throughout songs, and you can also play triads up and down the neck using inversions. It's worth taking your time with it. I'm rushing through because the nature of videos, we're sort of packing a lot in. Doesn't mean you should rush through it though. You should probably get lost and sort of take your time, spending a lot of time if you can, going through these inversions, using triads up and down the neck, using chord progressions, trying to find where's the root position, where's the first, second, and third inversions. Remember, there's major and then there's also minor. We mostly focused on major today. Doesn't mean minor is any less important. Just means major is where you usually start, and then do these with minor chords. So, like I said, study guide on the Patreon is upcoming soon. Hope you're doing well out there, and this is a fun way to get a fresh new sound, increase our chord vocabulary by 300%, teaches us the fretboard, and also teaches us bass movement and bass lines. All right. Remember to subscribe, forgot to mention that earlier, and check out some other videos. Hope you're doing well out there. We'll talk to you later, everyone. Thanks. Bye.